All right, and this is what we are doing with Phlegra. And I would like to say right off the bat, I don't recommend this build for Phlegra. In my defense, I didn't have a ton of time to prepare, but probably should have just gone with something simpler for this. So we have an Awake Gorgon. I think Gorgons are a really cool chassis, and I do think that they have some viability as Awake expanders. But what a couple of test games taught me, and the game itself, is that their late age expansion viability is uneven because they really cannot handle crossbows. So I would love to try a Gorgon expander for the right nation in the early age where there are no crossbows, and I think you might be able to get away with it in the middle age where there are fewer crossbows. But in the late age, you are definitely rolling the dice. That said, there definitely are some advantages. So built-in recuperation, really nice for expanders. Full gear slots, which is rare for expanders, though she can only wear a crown. Built-in fear, which is pretty useful. And then really the main reason that I wanted it is this petrification aura. So, they have to take a magic resistance check after they've been petrified. And if they fail that, they will die. And I was pretty concerned about getting run over by some really nasty sacreds as Phlegra. I think there probably are other tools you could use, but I do think this is a valid concern. And, I took a look at Zayeden and a few other of the sacreds that we were likely to be going up against. And a lot of them, at least base, didn't actually have great magic resistance. So I felt that, Gorgeous George here might be able to help us out, maybe deter some people from jumping us early. Was also hoping to pick up some provinces. Like I said, Gorgons definitely can take provinces. Our Bless is tailored around, expanding with the Gorgon. This doesn't really do anything for our Tyrants. Obviously, our Tyrants would need a Shroud in order to access this, but, this is basically us saying, hey, we're not going to put a Bless on our Tyrants. We're just going to use the Tyrants as they are. But the low hit points for the Gorgon is another thing that's a big problem, so larger helps out significantly. Also doesn't hurt our cap-only mages, but not really very relevant. The low light vision, a bit of a toss-up. It's never a bad thing to have a unit that does okay in the dark. With the 4 nature, that does give us pretty solid access into nature, which is something that the nation is missing, Phlegra. So that's kind of nice. The amount of earth that I took was a mistake. I was hoping to be able to cast Earthblood Deepwell, and for that we would need Earth 6, which would need Earth Boots. And then there's one other miscellaneous booster, and I was thinking, hey, we have Earth Astral, so we're totally fine. We have that other booster. But that is an Astral booster that uses Earth, not an Earth booster. For the other Earth booster, we would need the Earth Blood Crosspath and some Blood Slaves. So definitely should have taken Earth 5. That was kind of a major error. And one that just, crept in as, I was tweaking things. We actually did start out with more Earth, but was also trying to squeak out some more scales. So fairly similar scales to what I like taking with Macone. Notable difference of taking Magic 3. I think Magic 3 on a Fire Nation, especially a Fire Nation with a bunch of cheap researchers, that can be pretty strong. So again, we're going to try to lean into the early game, more, and having quicker research definitely going to help with that. To pay for that, we've gone with Misfortune instead of Fortune, which definitely makes me a bit sad. We've also reduced our Turmoil to try to be able to recruit more of the Mouflon Cataphracts. This is definitely something I was back and forth on. In the future, I may just try to tank this and ignore the Mouflon Cataphracts in favor of other units, but that's not where my head was at for this run. Dom Strength 5, perhaps a little high, could have gone with 4, but I do like having a decent Dominion Strength. There are a lot of really nasty things that can happen if other people overwhelm your Dominion, so I do think that going with a really low Dominion score does have its issues. So yeah, that's pretty much the build. Like I said, really far from optimal. Really the main thing that this is intended to do is try to give us a bit of an early advantage by having better expansion and dissuade anyone from just rolling us over. My main objective for this game was to just not die immediately. If we make it to the end, that would be great. Obviously, we're going to try to win it, but I think it's going to be a pretty tall order considering we're going to be going up against better players with a nation I've never played before with very little time to prepare. I will probably discuss, Phlegra and some possible builds, at the end of this series. Definitely learned a lot about the nation throughout the game. All right, welcome to the 2022 tournament, Game 10, where we're in the interesting position of having subbed in right from the start. So this is our build, but this was not the nation that I would have chosen. But we're going to see what we can do with Late Age Phlegra. This is a mapnuke map. I think this is the first time I'm casting a game on a mapnuke map. I've played a few of them. It's just a different generator that will generate maps for Dominions 5. It's pretty popular because it's a lot more fair than the vanilla map generator. You can get some really bizarre results with that. But mapnuke maps tend to be very grid-like, so we're pretty much guaranteed to have a neighbor, a capital almost directly to our north here, and a capital directly to our south, and the same to the east and the west. I believe roughly 2 provinces away from our capital is kind of like what is expected expansion. Of course, it's going to vary wildly depending on how everyone does. But if all goes well, we will at least manage to grab everything within 2 of our cap circle. From our capital. We'll probably talk choke points and such a little more next time when we actually are looking to be sending out an expansion party. That said, we have no true underwater nations. We have no Late Age Rlyeh, basically, and the Late Age Rlyeh is the only one that starts underwater. But we do have an Atlantis, and so my suspicion is that Atlantis is going to be starting somewhere around here, this larger than normal lake, because they do really want to get underwater, although I don't think that's guaranteed. In terms of our cap circle, it could be better. So Late Age, I think for most nations, is a lot more resource intensive. Phlegra is perhaps even more resource intensive, especially early on. Like, resources are going to be the limiting factor, and we really only have like one, at least province type that's going to give us decent resources that's in our cap circle. That said, we have enough provinces in our cap circle, and also like this plains, it has a lot of hammers here. It's still only 37. That's decent for a plains, but yeah, this is not a great cap circle for us, though it will make moving our armies out significantly easier, right? Since we don't have a bunch of highlands that are going to block our movement. But a lot of our stuff is pretty slow anyway, so pluses and minuses. In terms of what we're doing to start things off, our recruitment, we're going to add just 2 Mouflon to our starting army. I think Phlegra's starting army is not great. We do start with some of these Helit archers. And this short bow in the Late Age is pretty useless. Not everything. There are still militia running around, right? So if you hit the right provinces, they can help you a little bit, but by and large, they're pretty useless. And that's half of our starting army, at least in terms of raw numbers. That said, though, this can take on, especially with the Mouflon on like an attack rear, it can take on some easier provinces. You can sometimes get 2 or even 3 provinces from it if you get lucky. I usually send it out right away. We'll see. Depends on like what's in the cap circle. We may need to reinforce it a little bit more. After that, we'll just be doing Mouflon expansion. Which I believe is fairly standard for Phlegra. I toyed around with a few other expansions, but Mouflon does seem to be certainly among the best options that Phlegra has. In terms of our mage recruitment, I definitely went back and forth on this. There's a lot to be said for just recruiting the shackled mages early on because they're very, very cheap, but they're fairly slow researchers. We have full magic scales, so that's going to help a lot. But research is really, really important for us to get our pretender moving as soon as possible. So I wasn't able to do enough testing to say, like, does this save us a whole turn if we get oppressors instead? Because they research at 11, so significantly faster. Now, whether or not that's going to like push us a whole breakpoint ahead, breakpoint being a turn in this case, I'm not 100% sure on, but we need to hit a couple different research goals really before our Gorgon is going to be, I hesitate to even say safe, but safer. So even if it doesn't cut us down, when we get Enchantment 2, which is really probably, you can send her out before then, but that would be really, really risky. So we probably won't unless we get desperate. Enchantment 2, of course, is useful for personal regeneration in this case, although it's going to be a school we want to go down anyway. And then Construction 2 will get her some gear. And at the Construction 2 gear, like breakpoint, she's fairly safe from independence at that point. But that also is going to come relatively late in expansion, like turn 8 or 10, somewhere around there. So, we're definitely going to have to try to expand a few times just with personal regeneration. And then, of course, construction is a good school for us to go down anyway because, we're a fire nation, so lanterns are going to be really attractive for us. And then, of course, we have a bunch of super combatants. So we're definitely going to want gear for them. So yeah, I think this is going to be good for us early on, and it will be good for us later as well. And I think that covers the majority of it. I do like profiting the starting commander. Again, our starting army is not great, so a little bit of extra help goes a long way. So yeah, I think that covers turn 1. All right, welcome back to Lucid's 2022 tournament where we are playing Phlegra. It is turn 2. We received a messenger from Calum. Looks like this went out to everyone. So they're going to be writing the chronicles of this game, I'm assuming in-game messages. So that's nice. We'll get to see our failure from at least 3 different viewpoints. If we include our own, we finish research in enchantment. So enchantment 1 doesn't really get us anything useful. We're really looking for that number 2. And then we have 10 prophet declarations. We are missing Utgard and Midgard. And I've already taken a look at this and done this turn. And this is what our cap circle is looking like. Not great. I went ahead and double checked and made sure that I was practicing against the correct independent strengths. This is strength 5. That's what I was going up against. Didn't ever get a cap circle this nasty. It's not all bad news. This province is looking relatively weak. It just depends on how many heavy cavalries there are. Usually there's only a couple, but sometimes these provinces can surprise you. 40 is not great, but militia and light cavalry, not too much of a problem. I think our starting army could handle that as long as there's not too many heavy cav. But that's probably it. So there's this province here, mostly light infantry, that's good. But then followed by crossbowmen, which is not great. And then the heavy infantry, it's okay. And then 50 of them, which, hopefully there's less than 50, but there could be more. So that's the good news. The bad news, this province, probably the worst news, mainly heavy cavalry and then crossbowmen, 60 of them potentially. Then barbarians, classic, 50 of them. It's not the end of the world, but we don't, we rely on protection, so barbarians are a bit of a problem for us. We may recruit up a stack of I was maligning our short bows, no doubt, but they do okay against barbarians. I'm just not really sure of the utility of recruiting like a whole stack of them, that we're going to be able to handle 1 or maybe 2 provinces, and then they're going to be kind of useless for us. They do have the benefit of not costing many resources, which is important because we're not going to expand this turn, it's looking like. Because our final option is a ton of horse tribe, so 50 of them. When the short bows we can more or less ignore with our heavy armor, but the lance charges we definitely cannot. Also, all of these provinces decently scary for our pretender. The horse tribe and the heavy cav and the barbarians are all an absolute no-go because of the lance charges and barbarians just dealing too much damage. They'll be able to easily overwhelm our regeneration and relatively modest protection. This province is a possibility, but again, it depends on how many heavy cavalry there are, and then our pretender really doesn't like crossbowmen, although that said, I haven't really tested too much with attempting to have her hold back. I know that archers will definitely advance to shoot at single entities, so I think that this would be pretty dangerous to send our pretender into. And alas, there are no mercenaries to pull us out of this mess. We didn't go for the archers last turn. It's only 30 of them, and they're not very useful because I believe these are short bow or maybe composite bow archers. Calum did grab them. They definitely would have been useful against the barbarians, but I'm not sure that they would have actually changed the balance of things. Maybe if this scout report is high, our starting army plus those mercenaries could have taken this. But we do not have them, so it doesn't matter. And the new mercenary that's available is an air mage, and we don't really have the research to make him useful. And frankly, I don't think he'd be all that useful in expansion anyway. So instead, we're going to use our priest to ping this province. Probably, I think if I were to do this again already with the making of mistakes, probably would just blind ping with this priest. They do reduce unrest, and that is important, but you can see like we already have some unrest. I don't know. The priests definitely do help, but it seems like you can't really ever get rid of the low level of unrest. So a single priest here in a place where we don't have a lot of unrest, not all that useful to us. I do hate the idea of losing useful commanders, and they are useful commanders definitely for us. in retreats, and since we have no adjoining provinces, there's usually they survive, but sometimes they don't. But in this case, I do think a blind ping would have been warranted because we really want to know exactly like what's in these two provinces. Because I just think it's going to be a little while before we're able to deal with these provinces, and I may have to rethink. Well, definitely, we're already going off script in terms of the recruitment, in terms of what I did. So like I said, we're not going to expand. We're going to go with 4 Mouflon, and we're going to maybe add 1 or 2 archers. But I think we're going to try to use the rest of the archers. Maybe not all of them, but at least a couple of them as bodyguards on our pretender to hopefully eat some lances of the heavy cavalry. But she won't be able to move out until like 2 turns from now, when we actually have enchantment 2. If we get enough research, we might be able to gamble just setting her up to cast a single spell and then pray that it's personal regeneration that she casts. But she is providing the majority of our research at this point, so we probably won't even be able to do that. So that covers turn 2. Not an auspicious start. All right, welcome back to Game 10 of Lucid's 2022 tournament, where we are playing Phlegra. It is turn 3, and I did change things up. We're going to go ahead and gamble with the god. So one of these is a ping, and one of them is our starting army. Okay, this is the ping, so we're pinging this province. It's not too bad. Maybe, more troops than I would have hoped, but not too many crossbowmen, which is nice. Our troops are heavily enough armored that we don't have to worry too much about the infantry, but the crossbowmen definitely can cause some problems. And now for the terror, excitement. If I had to describe the Gorgon in a single word, it would be inconsistent. So I've actually seen a Gorgon take out a province, roughly this strength by itself, although it didn't have a priest with a berserker pelt, although I don't think that's going to make the difference. So theoretically, this is going to go just fine, although, I don't know, we'll see here. She is set to attack closest. Maybe should have forward positioned the archers a little bit more. The most important thing is that she not eat the lance strike. We were hoping the archers would take the lance strike, and then we were hoping, okay, this is looking good. So, we don't have personal regeneration yet, so this is very risky, even with personal regeneration. I've seen the Gorgon with this bless die many a time, even though we have the larger bless, so we have more hit points. She doesn't have enough protection. I'm also not sure I would ever do a Gorgon in the late age again, because crossbowmen are pretty much a no-fly zone for us, and we're definitely not out of the woods yet, actually, because light cavalry could absolutely kill her. So hopefully we'll get the route here. Our Mouflon came back to help us out, which is nice, I guess. And you can see our army is mostly wrecked, so we'll probably actually just send the army home for reinforcements, or we may carry forward with our pretender in tow, like with the remains of this army. That said, it's the infantry really that the losses there that hurt. The archers, they pretty much always die really early. It's pretty difficult to keep them alive. So that went about as well as could be expected, and that was my expectation, but like I said, just very inconsistent. So you never know when like a couple of militia say are going to kill your pretender. I'll catch you guys after the cut. All right, this is the situation and what we're doing about it. Not too much to say. We are going to move forward with, our reduced group here. I've had pretty good success against, this is a really easy province. Is it really going to help us that much? It's probably not that rich of a province, and it's not going to fix our resource problem from our capital. So in some ways, it's not that useful. Also, it would be really nice to grab this province. We can already see some enemy dominion down here, and this is essentially going to serve as our natural southern border. This is a very nice province, and it's not very heavily defended, right? Like light infantry, crossbowmen, heavy infantry. For the late age, this is relatively easy, and there's not a ton of units here. But like I said, crossbowmen, that's a no-fly zone for our Gorgon, especially without regeneration, and there's no way our 6 infantry and Prophet is going to be able to take it on. The Mouflon as well, although, with only 2 Mouflon, that's, it's not enough. We're going to go for what we can pick up. In terms of recruitment in the capital, we're going to recruit a cheaper researcher mage and then a commander to lead our next expansion party. 5 Mouflon is less than ideal. I would say that 8 Mouflon I had pretty good success with in terms of not running into too much attrition. Especially with the crossbowmen here, there's quite a bit of danger to sending a Mouflon group that small into it. That said, we are putting in a bid on a mercenary, the Armored Fist of God. I believe these are like 25 pikemen. So we're going to way overbid here because we are kind of concerned about our expansion. That said, I think this is a pretty decent mercenary group, and there hasn't really been much in the way of decent mercenary groups yet. So I'm sure we're not going to be the only person putting down a significant bid. I know that some players will cut all recruitment in order to be able to hire mercenaries. There's definitely something to be said for that, but I don't think 25 pikemen is going to be able to expand for us really in a useful way by themselves. And then of course the risk of not recruiting anything is okay, well then you don't get the mercenaries and you just spent a turn doing nothing. That seems very unappealing to me. So we are making some cuts in the sense that you could be getting an oppressor who's going to research a little bit faster. So instead I've gone down to the shackled mage, which is in some ways we've discussed might be better because it's going to help us get up infrastructure. They cost less. So I don't hate dropping down, and we're going to need a commander anyway, and recruiting this commander doesn't knock out, we can't get an additional Mouflon anyway. You do have to be careful about that. These guys do take up a decent amount of resources, but in this case it doesn't really change our recruitment. So we're kind of making some cuts, but certainly not as many cuts as I know some players will do for the really good mercenary groups. Now I don't know if we're already overpaying by a lot, so not sure how much more gold I'd even want to invest in these guys anyhow, but it would let us definitely take this province and probably take this province as well. Luckily these scout reports, we don't have to worry about the scout report here. We know exactly what's going on. So 50 units, mostly light infantry though, the better light infantry with javelins sadly. But yeah, this scout report is down. I think it was 50 horse tribe last time, so that's good. This scout report is up, so that's not ideal. And then this is also down, which is nice, although this is probably 40 or 50, and it says mainly heavy cavalry because I think it was reporting 60 last time. So things are a little less desperate, but we're not even close to out of the woods. This is a dangerous move here until we get up enchantment 2. I was kind of planning on leaving the Pretender at home until we could at least get enchantment 2. That doesn't make things completely safe, but it makes them a lot safer. But just the way things have been going, the roles that we got, we're just gonna have to give it a go. That she should be fine. One nice thing about our bless, we're gonna be going out of Dominion here, and normally you don't get the benefit of your bless, but since our bless is just larger, it's always active, so we don't have to worry about that. We'll still get the bonus HP, which is really important for our Pretender at this phase of the game. And of course our priest was killed when retreating in enemy territory. That is the risk of pinging. And then also we're gonna reduce our bid. I just noticed that this is a scout province, and I definitely want a decent number of scouts. Mainly, I really want to avoid a bump with our Pretender. There are definitely expansion parties that she could beat, but if she runs into some nasty sacreds, especially not having personal regen and not having any kit, that's a good way to lose a Pretender. So I think at least one scout, probably 2 or 3, to try to stay ahead of her wherever she's expanding, that would be ideal. So yeah, I think that more or less covers turn 3.